Hi, this beautiful module right here is the new Dual LFO by Soundforce. Soundforce is probably best known for its Juno 60 and MS-20 inspired modular building blocks and sturdy hardware controllers for virtual instruments based on these and other analog classics. Many thanks to Nicolas for sending me this module. I've always been a fan of syncable LFOs as they just make so much sense, and Dual LFO is twice that and more. The first time I saw Dual LFO on a picture, I thought I'd finally found an LFO module with built-in attenuators for the LFO level. And while I was wrong about this, the attenuators on Dual LFO proved to be really useful in getting versatile modulation out of it. It's really sturdy as well, and the knobs are really nice. Let's listen to some patches first and then I'll show you, or you could of course skip right ahead. The timetable is in the description of the video. Let's have a listen to what we can do with Dual LFO. The gray cable here is the left output of Vortex. It's just going into the ripples filter. There's a little bit of wave folding on Vortex and a little bit of modulation, just to give the filter something more to chew on. I'm just going to connect the bipolar output of the first channel of Dual LFO to the frequency modulation input of the filter. And I turned the filter to its slowest speed, and I will just let that modulate the filter so you can hear actually how slow it is while I explain the features of Dual LFO. First of all, there's a knob for the wave selection. Currently we're at the sine setting, but there's a square wave, there's a pulse wave 2, there's a saw wave, an inverse saw, there's a triangle wave, a stepped triangle, and then there's a stepped random as well. Below that, in the current setting, is a knob that controls the speed of the LFO, and when we're in the clocked or tap tempo setting, this is actually a knob for the divider or the multiplier of the tempo. But more on that later. Below that there's a switch. The switch says free. It's actually in free mode, so not synchronized when the switch is to the right. Then there's also the switch for the speed of the LFO. Currently we're at the low setting. There's also a medium setting and a high setting. And it's perfectly possible to use Dual LFO at audio rates. It goes extremely high actually, but I'll show you later. Then there's two attenuverters. These are for incoming CV. The first one actually makes it possible to use CV to control or select the waveform. The second CV input here is a CV input which is a frequency modulation. So in the current setting, in the free setting, this just changes the speed, just like you would with an FM input on an oscillator. And when we're in synced mode, so when the knob or the switch for free is to the left, then the CV we send into this actually switches between different dividers and multiplication, and we can set the intensity of this CV modulation for both these inputs with these attenuverters, and this is really useful. I really didn't know I needed this, but they're great. So these are the inputs for that modulation. Then below that there's the tap input, which is the input you would use to synchronize your LFO. When I say synchronize, I really mean like a tap tempo, and I really want to make this clear. There's a lot of LFOs, I think most of them are able to sync by resetting the phase of the LFO. This has nothing to do with the actual frequency the LFO is oscillating at. This just returns the phase to zero, so restarts the LFO whenever there's a signal sent into the reset input. And we have this on Dual LFO as well. So we can not only sync it to a tempo by using the tap input, we can also reset the phase of the LFO by using the reset input. Then there's two outputs for every LFO in Dual LFO. Currently I'm using the bipolar output. This is just a signal as you would expect from an analog LFO. It goes above 0 and below 0 volts. And next to it we have a unipolar LFO signal, which is actually offsetted, so it stays above 0 volt. So I think by now you have an idea how slow actually dual LFO can go. So let's listen to some different waves and different speeds. So we're in the free setting, which means dual LFO, or at least this channel, is not synced. And by the way, whenever you send in a sync signal into the tap input, it is normalized to the second channel, so you can synchronize both LFOs with one sync channel. Of course, you can choose to use one of the LFOs in free mode and one of them in sync mode, but that's up to you. You can really do what you want. So this is the sine wave. I'm sure you all know how a sine wave and a square wave sound. There's a pulse wave. There's a saw wave. The inverse saw, which is really useful to use when you're sending the unipolar output into a VCA. But of course you could do it with the bipolar one too. I like to use LFOs into VCAs because then I don't need to patch up an envelope. So then there's the triangle. There's the step triangle. Let's slow it down. Turn up the resonance. Maybe we can hear it a little bit better then. And then there's the stepped random. Which of course you need to do something like this with. And I really like to have a random or a stepped random waveform on an LFO, because this is actually the waveform I use the most, especially when I'm able to sync it. And when you turn these up into audio rates, it gives you a nice flavor of noise, which you can use to make percussion or snare sounds with. Okay, so let's listen to the square wave. Turn up the rate. So this is in the low setting of the switch. Let's go to the medium setting. I think I'll remove the audio input going into the filter. You should be able to hear it like this too. So as you can hear in the medium speed setting of the LFO, it's already audio rates when you turn the knob completely to the right. The high setting is even faster. Let's connect the oscillator to the filter again. Let me show you how well dual LFO syncs. I'm using a gate output from Pamela's new workout as a clock. And let me switch off the free mode, so it actually syncs to whatever signal is coming in. And as you can see, that it's syncing nicely as well. It's really useful to have these LEDs, by the way. These indicate the signal that's coming in. And what I really like about the LEDs that indicate the LFO level is that they not only show us the tempo the LFO is going at, but actually show us the amplitude as well. Love that feature, because you're not always hearing very clearly what you're doing. Being able to see it Makes so much more sense. Let me get some percussion going at the rate of the clock I'm sending in, so we can actually hear how well Dual LFO syncs. So this is a hi-hat going at the same rate as the clock signal I'm sending in. You can of course also watch the LEDs. And by the way, when the switch is at 0, so the free mode is turned off, the switch for the speed setting doesn't do anything. Let me slow down the tempo so you can hear how well Dual LFO reacts to that. Let's speed it back up. So at 1, the LFO rate is the same as the clock signal coming in. We have a divide by 2, a divide by 3, divide by 4, divide by 5, no, a little bit further, divide by 8. Then to the right of 1 we have the multiplications. We have a multiply by 2, multiply by 3, multiply by 4. At this point it will get hard to hear, but there's a multiply by 5 as well, and a multiply by 8. All these odd multiplications and divisions really make it possible to create cool polyrhythms with Dual LFO. And really, when you stick to the square wave or the pulse wave, you could actually use Dual LFO just as a clock divider or a clock multiplier. You're even able to reset it. So you could even use this to trigger drums with polyrhythmic triggers. Now, since we're in the sync setting, I want to show you something that's really cool. When you turn one of the LFOs, let's use the second one, to the stepped random, you can use this stepped random LFO to change the clock divider of the first LFO. For this you just connect it to this jack, and by turning the attenuverter you control just how much the rate of the LFO will change according to the signal coming in from the second LFO. And this, of course, makes it very easy to create cool, wobbly bass lines. And for this feature alone, I think Dual LFO is just worth it. I mean, how easy is this to set up? And it's just instant gratification. Let me add a kick drum to this. Let me see if I can patch up a snare drum as well. And let me change the tempo of the clock coming in. Just watch the top LEDs here, and you'll hear how well Dual LFO follows the tempo. And while I always have loved my Frequency Central Wave Runner because it's able to synchronize, I can say from experience it does not track tempo this quickly. At least it tracks tempo really well, but when you change the tempo it does not react this quickly. I mean, this is just crazy. And let me use the unipolar output of the first LFO into my Ripples VCA. I mean, this is just great. Let me try using the unipolar output of the second LFO to change the wave shape. Let's slow this one down. Now if we switch over to the free setting for the first one, let's go to the slow setting on the switch. The modulation we're sending in to this CV input, this will just modulate the frequency. And we can still attenuate the modulation with the attenuator. And of course I connected it to the wrong jack. I need to connect it here. Now we can still use the reset input to make it a little bit more synchronized. So the reset input resets the phase of the LFO, which just means it starts over again at what tempo or what rate it was going at in the first place. But you can get an LFO to sound really musical even without really tempo syncing it, just by resetting it. Like right now. You can see when I remove this modulation, this is just rerunning. So at this point it has no use of looking at these numbers, because these only refer to the tempo when we're in the synced setting. Now, one of the things you can do with a cool LFO like Dual LFO, which you can't do with a regular LFO, is a patch like this. In this patch I have used a clock coming from Pamela. This is the yellow cable. As I told you, this is normalized to the tap input of the second LFO. Let me connect this trigger to a percussion sample. So the rim shot you're hearing is in time with the clock that Dual LFO is receiving. And I've divided the first LFO by 4, and I've divided the second LFO by 3, and I'm using the output, the unipolar output of the second LFO to reset the first one. To give you an idea when this reset is happening, I'll patch it to a hi-hat. So the rim shot is the tempo of the clock, and the hi-hat, or probably tambourine, is the tempo or the rhythm of the reset coming from the divided second LFO. Let me add a kick drum to this. Now this first LFO, I'm using the bipolar output to run into the exponential FM input of Vortex. It's also routed with a stackable to the filter. And depending on what waveform you choose for the LFO that's modulating Vortex, you of course get different kinds of modulation. So this is the saw wave. We'll have a look at the scope in a moment, but what I discovered is that when the reset trigger is sent into the first LFO, which is synchronized to the tempo of Pamela, so when it receives a reset, it indeed resets its phase, but the next time first LFO receives the clock, it resets its phase again. Well, let's switch over to the triangle. The step triangle is really cool too. I tuned the FM index for the exponential FM on Vortex in such a way that this actually sounds musical. But you of course can go haywire with this. So I'll mute the kick drum again. Keep in mind that the rim shot is in time with the clock that Dual LFO is receiving, and that the tambourine is in time with the reset that I'm sending to the first LFO. Let's go over to the scope, which is there. I've momentarily removed the reset trigger going into LFO 1. So we're still listening to the output of Vortex being frequency modulated by the output of LFO 1 of Dual LFO. But I've engaged the sync option on Vortex, the oscillator sync that is, so we have a little bit of a different sound to listen to. So the rim shot is still the clock. I've turned the divider to 1, so the LFO is completely in time with the clock. This is divide by 2. This is, I think, divide by 3. Yes. And this is divide by 4. The tambourine is still the signal coming from the second LFO, which I will connect to the reset input of the first one now. And as you can see, every time the tambourine hits, the phase of the first LFO is resetted. But then, when the next clock trigger comes in, it resets the phase again. And this creates a really interesting modulation. I haven't seen this before, turning the divide on the first LFO to divide by 8. And of course, it will never complete its cycle because it's being resetted by a faster tempo. And at the moment, LFO 1 is divided by 2, and LFO 2, which is still resetting the first LFO, is divided by 2 as well. And this way we get a unipolar LFO as well. Now let's remove the reset signal altogether. And while we're here, let's do some dual LFO diagnostics. So this is the bipolar output. It's a sine wave, as you can see. Let's switch over to the unipolar output. And as you can see, this is exactly the same wave, but offsetted above 0. Let's go to the bipolar output again. Let's have a look at the square wave. This is a nice even square wave. The pulse wave is a little bit different. This is a really perfect saw wave, an inverse saw. Triangle. Now the step triangle. You can see there's not a lot of steps, but I actually like it better this way. And then there's the stepped random. Let's switch the LFO over to free running mode. The exact numbers for the frequencies and the ranges of the LFO are in the manual. I'll put them on screen. Let's have a look if I can find out what frequencies these are with my scope. Now this is, I'm not going to wait a minute. But the fastest we can go in the low setting is about 10 Hertz. Okay, let's go to the medium setting. So that seems to be around 1 Hertz. And when I turn it completely up, that looks like about 150 Hertz. And then the high setting around 30 Hertz to about, let's say 1K. So those are the ranges. I'll conclude this video about the Soundforce DUAL LFO here. I feel like this module is a really interesting add-on to my rack and possibly also your rack. As you can see, the build quality is really good. I'm really trying to wobble this knob here and it's just not doing anything. Even these tiny little knobs feel really sturdy. Everything about this module just screams quality, and I really love that. The functionality is great. There's loads of possibilities of self-patching, like this patch and a few other patches I showed you. It's awesome to be able to change the divider of the LFO with external CV, as well as the wave shape. I love how the range is really wide too. Thanks again to Nicolas for sending me this module. I really like it. I hope you learned something in this video about DUAL LFO. If you liked it, maybe you can share it with someone who is on the lookout for a versatile and high quality LFO module. If there's any questions about DUAL LFO, please leave them in the comments. If you just want to say hi, that's cool as well. It's always fun to get some feedback. Thanks for watching. Bye.